From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. New legislation is now in place in Montana aimed at giving victims of violence a little more peace of mind. House Bill 449 revises laws about electronic monitoring as a condition of pretrial release. The 2021 Montana legislature approved the bill that requires judges to order electronic monitoring as a condition of release for certain crimes like felony partner family member assault, strangulation, felony stalking, or a felony violation of a protection order. The only exception is if a defendant can prove electronic monitoring isn't necessary for the victim or community's safety, or it's not needed to ensure the defendant complies with release conditions. Well, before this bill, electronic monitoring was an option, not a requirement. The bill also expands victim notification of a defendant's GPS violations. MTN's Shannon Newth spoke with members of law enforcement, the judicial system, and a woman who's been directly impacted by domestic violence to learn why this bill matters.
Under the big sky, there's a problem affecting thousands of Montanans every year.
Not a lot of people want to talk about domestic violence or sexual assault or stalking. However, the problem is continuing to rise.
According to the Montana Department of Justice, law enforcement responded to more than 4,000 cases of domestic violence in 2019. That averages out to an act of domestic violence like assault, strangulation, or stalking every 2.5 hours. It's a problem that's only gotten worse during the pandemic.
We've seen a dramatic increase in domestic violence related charges, among other things.
House Bill 449, which went into effect July 1st, aims to help protect domestic violence victims.
Legislation is a recognition of the impact that these crimes have on victims.
Nervous and afraid and worried.
This bill hits close to home for Amanda Scott.
My daughter was assaulted.
She's a big proponent of GPS monitoring.
As a mom, you at that moment want to be there every step of every day for them to make sure they're safe and protected. And unfortunately, I couldn't do that. She had to go to school. I had to go to work. She had things that she had to do, and I had to know that she was safe. GPS provided me with that feeling of security so that even if I couldn't be with her during that point in her day, that I knew that there was still something in place that would protect her when I couldn't be there.
House Bill 449 also expands victim notification to get real-time information about an offender's violation of bail conditions and more.
For instance, you program in the victim's address or their workplace or their school. And if you had, for instance, a 1,500-foot radius drawn around there, if the offender came within that particular zone, then, of course, the victim could be notified, as well as if they come within the proximity of that victim's phone itself.
Pinsky, along with Cascade County Sheriff Jesse Slaughter, see benefits of the bill inside detention facilities.
The other thing it could potentially do in the future moving forward is it could reduce jail population and jail overcrowding for those pretrial offenders.
The burden of paying for GPS monitoring falls on the defendant.
They all have a constitutional right to bail. Everybody who is charged with a crime is innocent until proven guilty. There's two sides to every story. However, we do have to ensure that we maintain public safety during that transition, and I think this is a good step.
The biggest takeaway from House Bill 449, added protective measures for victims.
I'm super excited to hear about the legislation and the potential that it has for those folks that sometimes feel like there's no one in their corner and that nobody can protect them.
In Great Falls, Shannon Newth, MTN News.
Well, a company called Scram Systems is one of the main producers of electronic monitoring and software that's used by law enforcement and the criminal justice system. That technology allows for alcohol monitoring as well as GPS tracking and victim notification. The Poverty Flats fire has been spreading in the northern parts of the Crow Reservation while settling down on the southern portion. It's estimated between 64,000 acres and 75,000 acres. BIA fire crews protected the community of Dunmore last night. The fire did jump the Little Bighorn River, but crews put out a few spots of 1- and 2-acre fires. No structures or homes have been burned. That fire is spreading in a northwest direction and is causing some challenges. Last night, crews put down some containment lines. The Type 2 incident management team was expected to arrive today. We're told it won't be until tomorrow or Saturday, though, until it demobilizes at another fire. And the Bighorn County Commissioner signed an emergency proclamation that includes an emergency mill levy of 2 mills or $45,000 for firefighting. All right, turning to meteorologist Matthew Hidalgo. Fires continue to erupt around the state. How's the air quality looking?
So the air quality is still in that unhealthy category. Let's take a look. But first, let's look at the current smoke conditions. Right now, most of the state is in that moderate concentration. With the northeastern part of the state, you are in that heavy concentration of smoke. We could see more of this smoke move into the area this evening. Now let's take a look at those air quality reports. The western and southern parts of the state are still in that unhealthy category. And again, we could see more of this smoke move in this evening. So if you have any respiratory issues, you might want to limit your time outside tonight and tomorrow. We'll have the full forecast in just a bit. Back to you, Russ.
All right, thank you, Matthew. Well, millions of people across the U.S. are affected by mental illness, but only a fraction know and understand the weight of a mental health crisis, a serious medical situation. Oftentimes, it's not doctors these individuals encounter during those first crucial moments. It's police officers. And as Q2's Victoria Hill reports, that's why Billings police officers go through rigorous training before their first day on the job.
Hey, how's it going, sir?
Chaotic. Loud. Commotion. This is what it's like for officers when they arrive to the scene involving someone enduring a mental health crisis. Not usually what you picture when you think of police training. This is called Crisis Intervention Team Program Training, or CIT.
So you were talking about guys out there. What guys?
Officers learn to identify a mental health crisis and strategies to de-escalate the situation and offer assistance.
Why don't we put down that knife and come out here?
Starting 4 years ago, all new Billings police officers are required to go through a condensed version of the program before they hit the streets.
You think they'll really help?
I think they will.
Then they're given the option to attend a full 40-hour week of training later in the year.
Are they out back? Are they out back?
Of the police department's 150 or so officers, 65 have attended the Crisis Intervention Team Academy.
It really teaches you just to listen to people and ultimately come to a solution.
Hey, it's Officer Woody with the Billings Police Department.
Officer David Woody is new to the Billings Police Department, fresh off of training, experiencing his first day on the job Tuesday.
It was something that I haven't really thought about as much, but it's really important.
CIT is a training tool officers will utilize more often than not.
More and more has been put on top of police officers and police department shoulders to handle certain crises throughout the city.
Officer Phil Tannis with the Billings Police Department is an instructor for CIT. Serving as a downtown Billings resource officer, Tannis frequently encounters community members living with a mental illness.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right, thank you for checking in.
Yep. Be good today, okay?
Yep.
Ranging from something as minor anxiety to, schizophrenia, 25 to 30% of every person in this country has some type of mental illness. So think about how you would like your family member to be treated by a police officer or by any provider.
Nationally, the public opinion of police encounters isn't always positive, but because of CIT, the Billings community only sees a small percentage of situations that escalate.
A lot of the calls for service, I'd say 99% of these calls go completely unnoticed to the common eye of the average citizen. Our officers are doing a great job de-escalating these individuals, getting to that safe solution, and doing it without anybody ever noticing, maybe a neighbor or two.
Billings police responded close to 1,500 suicide intervention calls in 2020, or about 4 a day. Each situation delicate and taken with various approaches for the best solution.
So it allows you to not only build that rapport with that individual, but it also allows them to de-escalate and make them feel like they're listened to, and then you can go from there to an officer-driven solution, which is sometimes it does require a mental health hold at the hospital so they can speak with someone with Billings Clinic's PAC team. And sometimes it's simply assisting them in setting up an appointment the next day with their own behavioral health provider.
The CIT training, I think, has really help them understand what mental illness is.
Mary Karen Merrick, a Billings volunteer with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, better known as NAMI, would know.
I initially became involved with NAMI probably 20 years ago. I have a brother who lives with mental illness, and my family and I were really struggling with what's going on.
NAMI played a major part in creating the CIT program. Now retired, Merrick is still committed to helping those with mental illness and their families.
It's one way to advocate, not just for him, but for other people.
An extra challenge for the officers comes when the person in a crisis is also under the influence of alcohol or drugs.
I think the people that you see that have substances on board are doing it to help just deal with what's going on. My brother was in Warm Springs a couple of years ago, and I met with the psychiatrist and the social worker, and he was using pot to help him at that point and not the antipsychotic medication.
In that moment, it's the officer's job to take everyone's reality, even through the impairment and crisis, toward a solution.
Good morning. I'm Officer Tans with the Billings Police Department. How you doing?
But CIT isn't always foolproof.
As much as we want it to work every single time, we need compliance from the individual in a mental health crisis. And sometimes those crises are so intense that it does require hopefully just soft restraint uses of force, and sometimes it escalates even to more than that.
It comes to an extreme when other lives are at stake.
This individual is trying to hurt themselves or others, and they need to take action immediately, or else another citizen is in danger.
Like any program, there's always room for improvement and growth. That's why the Billings Police Department is working with a grant that would allow them to create a co-responder model where a mental health provider responds to crisis calls alongside officers.
Because sometimes simply having an officer with a badge isn't so intimidating that an individual doesn't feel comfortable connecting with us, which is understandable.
Despite good efforts, Merrick says a deficit in our area is keeping those with mental illness from getting the treatment they truly need.
We don't have a lot of providers to provide the help. I mean, the officers are limited in what they can do. We don't have case management, psychiatrists are few and far between.
But she sees an opportunity in an upcoming public safety levy that would give the department what it needs.
I just feel the size of, where Billings is going population-wise, and what's happening with the culture around the United States. It's very obvious we need to give them all the training we can, and we need to give them all the people, all the cops.
And because the department is in need of more officers, even if one is interested in the CIT Academy, it doesn't guarantee them a spot. Tight staffing prevents the department from sending all interested officers through the 40-hour course.
The whole term for law enforcement is serve and protect, right? And that's what we want to do, is we want to serve the community and we want to protect them and keep them safe. Good. And we want to do that to the best of our ability as often as possible.
In Billings, Victoria Hill, MTN News.
If you ever have a mental health crisis on hand, you can call 911 and specifically request a CIT-trained officer to respond. Still to come on the MTN 10 o'clock news here on Q2, as President Biden says, prove it when it comes to federal employees and vaccinations. Billings School District 2 Superintendent says no to masking up. We'll have details coming up. And in sports, from the court to the track, a longtime Montana coach is now heading into the Hall of Fame. We'll hear from her coming up in just a bit.